Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to do the next set of notes. We're now moving on to Module 2. So we'll focus on the first set of notes from Module 2, and we'll get started right away so we can get this done, all right? All right, so this is going to be the focused on the criminal justice system. Basically our goals, our learning objectives this week are going to be differentiate between local, state, and federal agencies, and then to summarize the roles of law enforcement organizations that kind of deal with different crimes that can occur. Okay. The second part of this, which will be next week, we will focus more on the forensic end of it and what the forensic specialists and crime scene investigators have to do. All right, so your assignment that's due this Friday, kind of a shorter assignment, probably only worth about 50 points. That's what I'm going to put it into Canvas for. You're going to get 5 short case studies. You just have to write a few sentences about each one. And basically, you need to tell me whether it's a local, state, or federal crime and what jurisdiction it would fall under, and then also describe what agency might be investigating that particular crime. So you got the 5 crimes listed over there, and it will also be added to Canvas so that you can see the exact crimes that we're referring to. All right, so let's go ahead. This will be a little bit shorter set of notes than some of the other ones, and we should get through it rather quickly, and then we can move on to doing the assignments that we just mentioned. So the phrase criminal justice system refers to a collection of federal, state, and local agencies that deal with crime or criminal problems, right? So we're looking at the structure of criminal justice. These agencies process suspects, defendants, and convicted offenders and are independent insofar as the decisions of one agency doesn't necessarily affect another agency. The basic framework of the system is provided by the legislative, judicial, and executive branches of government. So we'll look at that both at the kind of the state and federal level, and then we'll kind of go into some of the different law enforcement agencies we can come into contact with. So what are the legislative, judicial, and executive branches? So this is kind of a review, or maybe it's a preview of what you're going to be covering in maybe government class or something like that you might be taking as well. So the legislature, for both the state and federal levels, basically define crimes, fix sentences, and provide funding for criminal justice agencies. The judiciary, which is basically all your trial courts, right? They adjudicate or make judgments on and pronounce the guilt of a person charged with crimes. And then you have the appellate courts, which basically interpret the law according to constitutional principles. Both state and federal appellate courts review legislative decisions and decide whether they fall within the boundaries of state law, federal law, and ultimately the United States Constitution. So judicial review kind of gives the courts the power to evaluate legislative acts in terms of whether they conform to the Constitution or not. If a law is in conflict with the Constitution, then an appellate court can strike down that particular law, right, and say it's not constitutional. Then you have the executive branch. They basically have the executive power that is given to president, governors, mayors, and on criminal justice matters, they have the power to appoint judges to the courts, right, to the judiciary, and heads of agencies such as the police chiefs, directors of Department of Corrections, and things like that. So what are the major components of the justice system? You have the police departments, you have the courts, and you have the Department of Corrections. And then you also have differences between the federal and state levels. So we'll try to kind of go through this, and then we'll get into the differences between state, federal, and local departments that could fall under, for example, the police department. So the police department are basically the public agencies whose purpose are to maintain order. They enforce the criminal law and provide services. Police officers operate in the community to prevent and control crime. They cooperate with prosecutors in criminal investigations. They help aid in gathering evidence necessary to obtain convictions in the courts. And then you also have your crime scene investigation units for some of the larger cities and state agencies that actually help in the gathering of evidence as well. Courts are tribunals. This is where the person accused of violating criminal law comes to have their criminal responsibilities determined by juries or judges. The purpose of the courts are to seek justice, to discover the truth, and the primary actors in the courts are your prosecutors, who are bringing the suit or the charge against the defendant. Then you have the defense attorneys, and finally you have the judges. The Department of Corrections includes probation, parole, jail, prison, and a variety of new community-based sanctions such as house arrest, electronic monitoring, those type of things. The purpose of correctional agencies are actually to punish, but also to rehabilitate and ensure public safety. So what's the difference between federal and state justice systems? Here's where we're going to start getting into the differences between the federal level and the state level, right? So federal and state justice systems carry out basically the same functions. They're enforcing laws, trying cases, and punishing offenders. But the laws and agencies of the two systems are a little bit different, right? So federal agencies are going to prosecute federal laws. State agencies are going to prosecute state laws, and so on. So the state legislature makes most criminal laws which are enforced by state and local police. City and county prosecutors try persons accused of breaking state laws in state courts. Judges sentence offenders convicted of violating state laws to serve time in either locally supervised jails or state-controlled correctional institutions. At the federal level, Congress enacts the criminal law, and federal law enforcement agencies, such as the FBI, enforces these laws. U.S. attorneys prosecute the persons accused of committing the federal crimes, and the U.S. courts try the cases. To punish and rehabilitate those that are convicted of federal crimes, the Federal Bureau of Prisons provides programs and institutions in which that can be carried out. So who's the first line of defense against the crime? So the administration of justice in the United States is mainly a state and local affair. It's your local police department that's going to be coming into contact with most of these individuals. And a lot of times, even for federal crime, it's going to be your local law enforcement that's going to come into contact with the federal criminal before a federal agency might take it over. So state and local governments employ 2/3 of all criminal justice workers and pay a much larger share of the cost of criminal justice than the federal government. Then, too, state, county, and city criminal justice agencies provide most of the protection from thieves, rapists, murderers, and other people that are undesirable to have in your community. So what are some of the federal agencies that you can have? Because you also have the federal level. So the main one that everybody thinks of is the FBI, but we're going to see that there's several different federal agencies, right? So federal law enforcement agencies, legally part of the executive branch of the United States government, are independent of other law enforcement agencies. So they could include the U.S. Marshal Service. The U.S. Marshal Service is a separate agency within the Department of Justice. The marshals protect the federal courts, judges, and jurors, guard federal prisoners from arrest to conviction, and they also investigate violations of federal fugitive laws. They can serve summonses, they can control the custody of money and property that are seized under federal law, and so on. You also have the U.S. Customs Service. Customs inspectors examine all cargo and baggage entering the country. Special agents can investigate smuggling, currency violations, criminal fraud, and major cargo frauds. Special Customs Patrol officers concentrate on contraband such as drugs and weapons at official border crossings, seaports, and airports. You have the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF. They deal with the criminal use of explosives with arson. Working with state and local police, it investigates arson cases. The ATF also pursues gangs that violate federal firearm and explosive laws and federal laws against drug trafficking. So So they got their fingers in a little bit of everything, but mostly things that are going to deal with firearms and drug trafficking and explosives, that type of stuff. Immigration and Naturalization Services, INS, they basically administer immigration and naturalization laws. Border Patrol agents patrol more than 8,000 miles of land and coastal boundaries in the United States, and they focus mostly on the immigration process. The DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, they enforce all federal narcotics and dangerous drug laws. You also have the big one, the FBI, right? Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI investigates more than 200 categories of federal crimes. In addition, the FBI assists federal, state, and local agencies through its extensive fingerprint files and other records. The FBI National Academy provides aid for some enforcement agencies throughout the countries. All right, so what about state agencies? Okay, some states have state police agencies with statewide authority. These state police forces originated with the Texas Rangers in the early 1800s that patrolled the Texas settlements. Following the Civil War, Massachusetts and Connecticut created state police agencies to help combat vice problem that they were going through. These states overcame resistance generated by the fear of centralized state police agencies and the fear that they threaten both civil liberties and local autonomy. Prior to this, everything was kind of localized. Each town had its own little sheriff or police force that worked within itself. In the years following 1910, when the number of motor vehicles started to proliferate across the country, the need for highway patrol started generating new calls for state police. So the state highway patrol officers, they have only a limited authority, and they're basically there to perform general law enforcement duties, such as investigating crimes occurring in state troopers present or on or near the highway system. Governors appoint the directors of state police or state highway patrols. Technological advances in traffic devices, alcohol testing, and communication systems all required officers to have greater ability and more training than their predecessors. So increasing number of states are setting statewide entry requirements and training standards for police officers, either through agency established academies or in conjunction with institutions of higher learning. In addition to law enforcement agencies, the training institutions, most states maintain a crime lab or a criminalistic service, some supportive investigative units. So we'll kind of go into more detail of that with the second set of these notes. Sheriff's departments enforce criminal law in most rural and unincorporated portions of more than 3,000 counties of America. In addition to law or county law enforcement, sheriff's departments have two other major duties. They maintain the county jails, which hold pretrial detainees, most persons sentenced for misdemeanors. Finally, the sheriff is an officer of the county court, so sheriff's office supplies bailiffs to provide security and management and detainees on trial, transport of prisoners to and from court, and serve a range of court papers such as summonses, forfeitures, eviction notices, and court judgments. Then you have local police departments that make up a great bulk of law enforcement agencies in the United States. New York Police Department employs more than 37,000 officers, but most local police departments only employ a few people. So 10,000 of the nation's departments employ fewer than 10 sworn officers. Many, such as the one in Empire, California example, employ a single officer. That's it. That's the entire department. In most of these small towns, crime is usually not a problem, so they don't have to employ a great number of people. And that kind of takes care of it. That's just a real quick overview of the federal and state and local levels or jurisdictions of law enforcement. When we do the next set of notes for next week, we're going to focus mostly on what the crime scene investigator and forensic technicians and lab technicians kind of do within these different jurisdictions. All right, guys, have a great day.